Hey everyone, Kavemi here with another Reddit story. Today's is one of those profound identity crises that comes straight out of a true crime series. It's about a man eating pizza who accidentally clicks on a documentary about adoption fraud and sees his own mother's face on the screen. This discovery unravels a decades-old crime that leads him to find his biological mother, only to have their time together tragically cut short. Settle in, enjoy the Minecraft in the background, and let's get into it. The title is, a Netflix documentary exposed my mum as a kidnapper, but the truth led me to the real mother I never knew. My name is Alex and I am 31 years old. I was eating cold pepperoni pizza on my sofa when everything I believed to be true shattered into a million fragments. The documentary was focused on adoption fraud in the 1990s. I almost skipped it. I'd clicked on it by pure chance while scrolling through streaming options. Half asleep after a draining shift at the local emergency room, where I work as a registered nurse. But something kept me watching. 20 minutes into the programme, they displayed a grainy photograph of a woman named Eliza Roberts. The narrator explained she ran an adoption service in Arizona called Hope Springs. The photo was from 1994, but I recognised her instantly. That was my mum. I bolted upright, startled, and knocked my pizza onto the floor. I quickly rewound the documentary and paused it on her face. There was no doubt. It was definitely her, only younger, with shorter hair and different glasses. The narrator reported that Eliza Roberts had been arrested in 1995 for falsifying adoption documents and selling infants to affluent couples. She would tell birth mothers their babies had tragically died during delivery, then turn around and sell those same infants for $50,000 each. My hands started trembling uncontrollably. I was adopted in 1994. My parents had always told me they got me through an agency in Arizona called Hope Springs. I snatched my phone and called my older sister Chloe. She answered on the third ring, sounding annoyed because it was past midnight. I asked her if she remembered the name of the adoption agency where Mum and Dad got me. She didn't know. She was only 6 when they adopted me. She asked why I was calling so late. I told her to switch on the TV. I told her to watch the documentary, giving her the precise timestamp. She was silent for a long time after I spoke. Then she said she'd call me back. I sat there staring at the paused image of my mother on the screen. My mum who made French toast every Sunday. My mum who attended every single one of my baseball games. My mum who helped me study for my nursing boards. My mum who might have purchased me from a criminal. Chloe called back 10 minutes later. Her voice was tight with disbelief. She said she'd watched it. She said we needed to confront our parents. I told her I was driving over there right now. She said she'd meet me there. I drove to my parents' house in a stupor. I don't recall the drive itself. I only remember pulling into their driveway and seeing the living room light still on. They were night owls. They'd definitely be awake. Chloe pulled up right behind me. She looked as shell-shocked as I felt. We walked to the door together. I used my key to let us in. Mum was in the living room reading a novel. Dad was watching the evening news. They both looked up, surprised by our sudden, late arrival. Mum asked what was wrong. I pulled out my phone and showed her the paused image from the documentary. Her face immediately drained of all colour. Dad stood up, asking what we were looking at. Chloe said, "A documentary about adoption fraud. That's Eliza Roberts, the woman you got Alex from." Mum burst into tears immediately, sobbing uncontrollably. Dad put his arm around her, but he looked profoundly confused. I asked if it was true. I asked if they knew about the crimes. Mum couldn't speak, she was crying too hard. Dad looked at me and Chloe, and his face crumpled with grief. He said, "We didn't know. We swear we didn't know." I asked him what he meant. He explained that they'd gone through Hope Springs because it came highly recommended. They'd been desperately trying to adopt for years. Every agency had a year-long waiting list, but Hope Springs promised them a baby within 6 months. It seemed too good to be true, but they were desperate. They paid $50,000. 2 months later, they got me. Chloe asked if they ever suspected anything. Dad said no. Everything appeared legitimate. They had paperwork. They had a birth certificate. Eliza Roberts told them my birth mother was a troubled teenager who couldn't keep me. They believed her story. Mum finally composed herself enough to speak. She said, "We loved you from the moment we saw you. We never questioned where you came from because you were ours. You were our son." I felt physically sick. I asked if they had heard about Eliza Roberts getting arrested. Dad nodded. He said it happened about a year after they adopted me. They saw it on the news. Eliza Roberts had been arrested for adoption fraud. Dad said he'd immediately called their lawyer, terrified that I'd be taken away from them. The lawyer assured them that as long as their paperwork was in order and they hadn't knowingly participated in fraud, I was legally theirs. So they never said anything. They never investigated further. They just kept quiet and desperately hoped no one would ever come looking. I asked if they ever tried to find my birth mother. Mum shook her head. She said they were too afraid of what they might uncover. I stood up. I needed to escape. I walked outside and sat down on their front porch steps. Chloe followed me. She sat down next to me and didn't speak for a while. Then she asked if I was okay. I said no. She said she understood. We sat there in silence until Dad came out. He said, "Mum wanted to talk to you." I went back inside. Mum was still on the couch, her eyes red and swollen. She said, "I know this changes everything. I know you must be angry, but I need you to know that we love you. We've always loved you. You are our son." I told her I needed time to process this immense news. She nodded. She said she understood. I left. Chloe stayed to speak with them. I drove home and sat in my apartment, staring at the wall until the sun rose. Then I started researching. I found articles about Eliza Roberts. There were dozens of them. She'd been convicted on 18 counts of adoption fraud and sentenced to 15 years in prison. She'd served 12 and been released in 2009. I found a list of families who'd been affected by her crimes. There were support groups, online forums, people who'd spent years trying to locate their biological families. I joined one of the forums and posted my story. I said I'd been adopted through Hope Springs in 1994, and I was looking for any information about my birth mother. Within an hour, I had 20 responses. Most were from people in similar, painful situations. They shared their stories. Some had found their birth families. Others were still searching. One message immediately stood out. It was from a woman named Sophia. She said her sister had given birth at a hospital in San Antonio in September 1994. The baby was a boy. The doctors told her the baby had died shortly after birth, but Sophia always suspected foul play because they never let her sister see the body. She said her sister's name was Eva Gomez. My birthday was September 2nd, 1994. I was born in San Antonio. I messaged Sophia back immediately. I asked for more details. She said Eva had been 18 when she got pregnant. The father was her high school sweetheart, but he'd left when he found out. Eva's parents were immigrants, deeply religious, and they were consumed by shame. They'd taken her to a hospital in San Antonio because they didn't want anyone in their community to know. When the baby supposedly died, Eva fell into a deep depression. She tried to end her life twice in the years that followed. She was 48 now. She'd never married, never had other children. She lived alone in Austin. Sophia said she'd spent years trying to find out what happened to that baby. She'd always believed he was alive somewhere. I told her I wanted to meet Eva. Sophia said she would arrange it. 3 days later, I was driving to Austin. Chloe came with me. She said she wanted to be there for me through this. We met Sophia and Ava at a quiet coffee shop. I recognised Ava immediately, not because I'd seen photos, but because when I looked at her, I saw my own face staring back at me. She had my eyes, my nose, my chin. She stood up when she saw me and her hand flew to her mouth. She started crying instantly. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there, overwhelmed. Sophia gently guided Ava back to her seat. We all sat down. Ava couldn't stop staring at me. She said, "You're real, you're alive." I said, "I think I might be your son." She started sobbing again. Chloe quickly handed her tissues. Sophia put her arm around her. When Ava finally calmed down, she told me her story. She'd been 18, scared and completely alone. Her parents had taken her to the hospital when she went into labour. They'd made her promise not to tell anyone about the baby. They said they'd handle everything. She gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She held him for maybe 30 seconds. Then a nurse took him away. A few hours later, a doctor came in and told her the baby had died. Heart failure. They said it was quick. They said there was nothing anyone could have done. She asked to see him. They said it was better if she didn't. They said it would only make things worse. Her parents had her sign some papers. She didn't read them. She was too distraught. Then they took her home. She spent years in therapy trying to cope with the loss. She never told anyone except Sophia. She carried the guilt and grief alone. But about 5 years ago, she'd seen a documentary about Eliza Roberts. She recognised the hospital where she'd given birth. She recognised some of the nurses. That's when she started to suspect. She'd reached out to the hospital, but they claimed all records from that time period had been destroyed in a fire. She'd tried to file a police report, but without evidence, there was nothing they could do, so she'd given up hope until Sophia saw my post on the forum. I asked if she wanted to do a DNA test. She said yes. We went to a clinic that afternoon and had our DNA samples taken. They said results would take about a week. That was the longest week of my life. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Eva, about the life she'd lived, about the baby she thought she'd lost. I also kept thinking about my parents, about Mom and Dad. They'd raised me, they'd loved me, but they'd also built their family on a foundation of lies. I was angry at them, but I was also angry at Eliza Roberts. I was angry at the system that had allowed this to happen. Chloe came over every day to check on me. She said Mom was a wreck. Dad too. They wanted to talk to me, but they were giving me space. I told her I didn't know what to say to them yet. She said that was okay. On the 7th day, I got the call. The DNA test was a match. Eva was my biological mother. I called her immediately. She answered on the first ring. I said, "It's true, you're my mum." She started crying again. She said, "I knew it. I knew you were mine." We made plans to meet again. This time, just the two of us. We met at a scenic park. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon. She brought a photo album. She showed me pictures of herself as a teenager, pictures of her parents, pictures of her life. She told me stories about her childhood, about her dreams, about the boyfriend who'd left her. She said she'd thought about me every single day for 31 years. She'd wondered what I looked like, what kind of person I'd become if I was happy. I told her about my life, about growing up with Mom and Dad and Chloe, about becoming a nurse, about my friends and my apartment and my job. She listened to every word like it was precious. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. She asked if I was going to tell my parents. I said they already knew. She looked surprised. I explained everything. The documentary, the confrontation, their admission. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Do you hate them?" I said I didn't know how I felt. She said, "They raised you, they loved you. That matters." I asked if she wanted to meet them. She said she didn't know if she could. Not yet. I understood. We spent the next few hours just talking, getting to know each other. By the time we said goodbye, I felt like I'd known her my whole life. And in a way I had. She'd always been there in the back of my mind. The missing piece I didn't know I was looking for. That night I finally called my parents. Dad answered. He sounded nervous. I told him I'd found my birth mother. I told him about the DNA test. He was silent for a moment. Then he asked if I was okay. I said I didn't know. He asked if I wanted to come over. I said yes. When I got there, Mum and Dad were waiting for me in the living room. Chloe was there too. She must have driven over when she heard I was coming. I sat down and told them everything about Eva, about the DNA test, about her story. Mum cried the entire time. Dad held her hand. When I finished, Dad said, "What do you want from us?" I said, "I didn't know." I said, I was still trying to figure out how I felt about everything. Mum said, "Do you want to leave? Do you want to go be with her?" I said, "No." I said, "Eva was my biological mother, but you are my parents. You raised me." That didn't change just because I'd found the truth. Mum sobbed. She said, I'm so sorry we didn't tell you. I'm so sorry we didn't try to find her." I said I was angry at them for not trying harder, for not questioning things more. But I also understood that they'd been afraid. Dad said, "We should have been braver. We should have done more." I said they couldn't change the past. None of us could. Chloe asked what I was going to do now. I said I wanted to have a relationship with Ava, but I also wanted to keep my relationship with Mom and Dad. Mom asked if Ava hated them. I said no. I said Ava understood that they'd loved me and raised me. She didn't want to take me away from them. Mum said she wanted to meet Eva. She wanted to apologise. I said I'd ask her. 2 weeks later, we all met at a casual diner. Me, Chloe, Mom, Dad, Eva and Sophia. It was the most awkward dinner of my life. Mum and Eva sat across from each other, both of them crying. Mum kept apologising. She kept saying she didn't know. She kept saying she was sorry for all the years Eva had lost. Ava said, "You gave him a good life. That's all I wanted for him." I wanted him to be happy. Mum said, I wish you could have been the one to raise him. Ava shook her head. She said, I was 17, I had nothing. I couldn't have given him what you gave him. I'm grateful he ended up with people who loved him. Dad said, we should have looked for you. We should have tried. Eva said, you were scared. I understand. It wasn't a perfect conversation. There were long silences, there were tears. But by the end of the night, something had shifted. Mum and Ava exchanged phone numbers. They promised to stay in touch. As we were leaving, Ava pulled me aside. She said, don't be angry at them. They gave you a family. They gave you love. That's more than I could have done at 17. I said, but you're my mom too. She smiled. She said, yes, I am, and I'm so grateful I get to know you now. Over the next few months, I split my time between my two families. I had dinner with Mom and Dad every Sunday, like always. I visited Eva in Austin every other weekend. Chloe came with me sometimes. Eva and I got to know each other. She told me about her life, her struggles, her triumphs. She'd become a middle school teacher. She loved working with kids. She said it helped her feel connected to the child she thought she'd lost. I told her about my life too, about nursing school, about my first job, about the patients I'd helped, about the lives I'd saved. She was so proud. She said I'd turned out exactly how she'd hoped. Mom and Ava talked on the phone once a week. At first it was awkward, but over time they developed a strange kind of friendship. They both loved me in different ways. They both wanted what was best for me. Chloe said it was the weirdest blended family she'd ever seen, but it worked. Then, 6 months after I found Eva, something happened that changed everything again. I got a call from Sophia. She said Eva was in the hospital. She'd collapsed at work, they'd run tests. She had stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctor said she had maybe 6 months to live. I drove to Austin immediately. I found Ava in a hospital bed looking small and fragile. She smiled when she saw me. She said, I'm sorry. I said, for what? She said, for leaving you again. I started crying. I said, you just got here, you can't leave yet. She said, I know, but I'm so grateful I got to meet you, even if it was only for a little while. I held her hand and cried. Over the next few months, I spent every spare moment with Eva. I took time off work. I drove to Austin every weekend. Sometimes I stayed for weeks at a time. Mum and Dad came to visit too. They sat with Eva. They talked to her. They brought her flowers and books and food she couldn't eat. Chloe came. She brought Ava puzzles and movies and kept her company when I had to work. Eva's health declined rapidly. By the 4th month, she couldn't get out of bed. By the 5th month, she was on heavy pain medication and slept most of the day. But when she was awake, she was present. She asked me questions about my life. She told me stories about her childhood. She made me promise to live a full, happy life. I promised. One night when it was just the two of us, she said, I need to tell you something. I said, what? She said, I don't regret anything. I thought I lost you and it broke me, but then I found you again, and you were this amazing, kind, wonderful person. You became a nurse. You saved lives. You made something beautiful out of something terrible. I said, you would have been a great mum. She said, I like to think I still was, just from a distance. She died 3 weeks later. I was there holding her hand. Sophia was on the other side of the bed. Mum and Dad and Chloe were in the waiting room. Her last words were, thank you for finding me. I said, thank you for never giving up. The funeral was small, just family and a few of Eva's friends from work. Mum and Dad came. They sat in the back, quiet and respectful. At the reception, one of Eva's co-workers came up to me. She said Eva had talked about me all the time after we reconnected. She said Eva was happier in those 6 months than she'd been in years. That made me cry all over again. After the funeral, I went through Eva's apartment with Sophia. We found boxes of things she'd saved over the years. Newspaper clippings about adoption fraud, forms she'd printed out, letters she'd written to me but never sent. In one box I found a baby blanket. It was blue with white stars. Sophia said Eva had bought it when she was pregnant. She kept it all these years, even though she thought I was dead. I took it home with me. That wraps up today's deeply emotional Reddit story. Thanks for hanging out with me while we journeyed through Alex's unbelievable journey of betrayal, loss, and the beauty of a family built on love, not blood. Kavemi here, signing off. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the relationship that grew between his adopted mother and his biological mother. Was that the ultimate act of forgiveness? And stick around for more stories with the usual Minecraft vibes in the background. I'll see you in the next one.